following program on KROC is sponsored and paid for by Meshbesher Spence.
Zach Bauer is in this morning. How you doing, Zach?
I'm doing well. Yourselves?
Excellent.
Good.
Excellent.
Happy Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely.
The big news this past week, of course, is the Jacob Wetterling case.
Yeah, we have
no
somber
longer
topics.
a cold case.
Yeah, no longer a cold case. So, 1989, October of 1989, Jacob Wetterling was abducted, and it's been an ongoing investigation, sometimes in cold case status and sometimes with tips here and there, but we have some answers finally from Danny Heinrich.
And a confession and a plea deal.
Yeah, confession and a plea deal, and a lot of people that won't be satisfied with the plea deal, but there's a lot of things that go into those considerations. And Danny Heinrich had been, at that point, already admitted to possession of child pornography as a federal charge, so he was looking at a 20-year statutory maximum, which was the agreement under that circumstance. Given the fact he's 53, that would put him at 73 when he actually gets out of federal prison, because you actually serve your full amount of time in federal prison. Mm-hmm. So I think the process that Attorney Lugar had from the U.S. Attorney General's office, and what he's talked about, obviously, is trying to get some answers in the Wetterling case and willing to give up some potential time that may ultimately be irrelevant in order to get some answers for the Wetterling family. And that's how this was essentially reached, that they would agree to a 20-year cap and not prosecute him in the murder of Jacob Wetterling or the kidnapping of Jacob Wetterling, as long as he's able to provide answers as to where the body was and also facts as to the actual incident itself.
I appreciate a plea agreement, mm-hmm. because then it gives answers. Yes. I appreciate that. But what I do not understand is the other young boy who he did assault, and there is evidence that could be used to convict him, but because of a statute of limitations, he can't be tried on that. Is there ever any talk about statute of limitations doesn't count when children are involved?
Well, there's a different statute of limitations when children are involved. Okay, so normally that would be a 6-year statute of limitations when it comes to a criminal sexual conduct offense. But when the person is under the age of 18, that extends to 9 years. And there's also an aspect of it that involves 9 years or 3 years after it's reported to law enforcement. So that was actually a part of the new legislation that occurred in 2015 to allow kind of these delayed reporting cases that may take place that happen when an individual was maybe very young. Maybe they were 7 or 8 or 9 when it happened, and now they're 25, 26, but it never was reported to law enforcement. Mm-hmm. That window was still now available with that legislative change. So no, the answer to it ultimately is, 9 years versus 6 isn't really a dramatic difference, and especially when you're talking about things that have been going to cold case status, usually well beyond that time period.
What is the reason for the statute of limitations in a case like this?
Well, I think statute of limitations on a criminal sexual conduct case, I think, is meant to obviously protect from a due process environment the defendant, because of the fact that evidence that a person could amount in their defense is usually at that point significantly stale. So if you have a person that's actually charged with an offense after, for instance, 13 years have passed, and they're actually in a circumstance innocent of that offense, the information that would be available to them to go back and try to defend the accusation that's now 13 years old is pretty limited. So statute of limitations are always done usually in a due process manner for the benefit of the defendant, and that doesn't make people always very happy in cases like this.
I don't know if it's part of the plea agreement or not, but can the Wetterlings sue Danny Heinrich?
They can now. As to whether or not Danny Heinrich has any monetary, money to actually, it's tough to get blood from a turnip ultimately. But it's one of the interesting parts of that plea deal, I think, was, they didn't need that confession to be in open court under oath, unless they were setting up, which is very obviously what they're setting up, which is they wanted facts as to both the Wetterling case and I think it's also the Shermel case, which is the other 12-year-old that was abducted. That is for purposes of them eventually committing Danny Heinrich as a dangerous and sexual predator if he were to actually get out of prison alive. So that was done for a reason. Not a lot of people in the public may understand why those facts that were probably very difficult for everybody to hear in open court were done in open court. Mm-hmm. But under oath, now admissions to 2 child kidnapping / sexual assault / murder will put him in a situation where he will eventually be committed if he does get out.
All right. So don't think he'll be walking the streets. And you mentioned if he gets out alive.
Oh, boy.
Child predators not treated very well in prison by other inmates?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's...
Is that the low end of the totem pole,
I
or
think
what?
there's always a spectrum and hierarchy in a prison system, and those people that have hurt kids and or murdered kids in this situation typically find themselves at the lower end of that spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and getting out of prison might be dangerous to his health as well in 20 years.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
No, absolutely.
All the way around.
Well, it's just such a sad situation, the whole deal, and it just seems to, it's closure for the rest of us, but certainly not for the Wetterling family. It just opens up the whole thing, and to actually hear what describe what their son was saying. That's,
Parents and grandparents.
Just makes you shake.
Yeah, it's too much.
If somebody needs an attorney, wants to get some advice from you guys at Meshbesher Spence, how do they get in hold of you, Zach?
They can get a hold of me at 507-280-8090 or visit us online at www.meshbesher.com.